Hello, this is Swords, and today I'd like to talk to you once again about a variant of the French 1882 Infantry Officers sword. This particular variant has one very unusual feature, despite looking like a standard 1882 from the outside. That difference is only apparent once we remove the scabbard, so let's take a look. This example of the 1882 pattern sword has what is known as a Préval blade in the French lexicon, named after General Antoine de Préval and designed in 1832. The dating on this particular example is uncertain. It may not be original to the hilt. However, designs like this were seen from around 1855 to around 1882 in African corps use, and later on in standard infantry use if an officer desired a custom made in this style. The Préval blade, as it's known, is essentially an oversized smallsword blade, featuring a hollow ground triangular blade, much like the earlier smallswords on which it is based. It is slightly broader than the standard smallsword and is slightly longer. It's also a little bit stiffer and heavier than a smallsword, which you would expect given that it has a sabre hilt and needs to be balanced to the fact that this is a relatively massive hilt, despite being made of the slightly lighter steel compared to German silver. The reason a person might opt for a Préval blade rather than the standard 1882 comes down to the fact that around the 1880s, the French army was shifting its military doctrine towards being thrust-centric. This heavily thrust-centric military doctrine meant that their standard swords had less cutting capacity and more thrusting capacity, being narrower and stiffer on average. As a result, one extreme is to go to a hollow ground triangular smallsword blade. Being exceptionally good at thrusting and very quick to maneuver the point, this makes sense from a logistical standpoint if you're designing a sword for a thrusting use. It also makes sense in terms of training, as many people would have learnt in their officers' academies how to train with a smallsword or a foil. The exact context in which this particular 1882 was used is not entirely easy to say. It may have been used by someone in the Chasseur d'Afrique regiment, being a light infantry officer in a colonial regiment in Africa, or it could have been used by someone in a standard infantry or even a cavalry context. It's very hard to tell, given that this has what is called a Saumur hilt, with the extra bars on the inside and an extra bar on the outside. These Saumur pattern hilts were often custom ordered by people either in cavalry or in the infantry. The fact that it has a steel guard further complicates identification, as these were in use both before and after 1882 in limited examples. The extra bars, likewise, were used both earlier and after 1882. In fact, it's rather accurate to say that the 1882 hilt pattern developed from the earlier African colonial regiment swords which used a similar hilt style. These were not a regulation pattern, they were of course custom ordered, as many officers' swords were at the time. Therefore, it's impossible to say whether this dates before or after 1882. What we can say is that it's 1882 in style. As mentioned, the blade on this is of course extremely different to the standard 1882. However, the measurements are relatively similar. This example weighs around 680 grams, within about 10 grams of my standard regulation pattern that I've shown in a previous video, and is around the same length, varying by only about 2 centimeters in length, with this one being slightly longer. The 89 centimeter blade on this is somewhere in the middle between infantry, light infantry, and cavalry, again making it hard to say exactly who would have ordered this sword. There are some hints which indicate that it may be for someone in the infantry. It's a little bit narrower than you would expect for someone in the cavalry, and it also has a ball quillant instead of having a large flat disc like the cavalry-styled bronze hilt 1882 inspired sword that I showed in a previous video. As I mentioned at the beginning of this video, this hilt is entirely made of steel, instead of German silver like the standard 1882. This has a few benefits. It is notably lighter and stronger than German silver. It does, however, corrode, and this one has picked up a very thin, dark patina, which hasn't really affected the integrity of the hilt. However, the grip integrity has been slightly damaged over time, with a small chip of buffalo horn having been removed, probably due to natural shrinkage and warpage over time. It's in a very common place, this breakage. Many French swords have a breakage in the heel of the grip, right where it connects to the knuckle burr. One rather unusual feature that this sword has is a copper wire grip wrap, as opposed to a silver wire that would suit the steel furniture. This is a stylistic choice, but indicates that it was, of course, custom ordered. The blade is marked Coulaux Klingenthal, meaning it was made by the Coulaux Brothers Company in Klingenthal, and does have two stamps, one bearing a B in a shield with a star, and one bearing a B in an oval with a star. However, the documentation from the era is not particularly accurate, and it could date from anywhere between around 1836 and 1880 based on the blade stamps. It's very hard to tell, as documents from this era are scarce and far between. This has been a quick video on a rare variant of an 1882. I hope you've enjoyed the video, because that's all I've got for you today. Till next time, stay sharp.